There's one possible real big surprise in the Big 12 that absolutely nobody is talking about, and it could have a big time saying on the rest of the conference.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke, Locked On, your team every day. This show is brought to you today by FanDuel. Right now, you can go and new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins at FanDuel. Check it out. That simple, that easy. All right, now, we've got a lot of questions going on in the Big 12. We're going to range from which teams are national title contenders, if there are any, which teams are, should be the favorites, some of the intrigue going on. But the biggest name in the Big 12 outside of Brett Yormark, Deion Sanders, we're getting pretty close to camp. And he's, like I said, and he's still not back. You start wondering what exactly is going on there. Obviously, you hope everything is okay with him. But he's been away he's been away basically all off season. And, with what Colorado was paying Deion Sanders, I believe Rick George gave him $11 million per year or whatever the case may be. You're kind of expecting an impact. And you look at the roster this year and I don't really see it. It doesn't help obviously that he's not there, but you look at it and you kind of wonder, all right, is he kind of mailing it in at this point, because you don't have Shadur, you don't have Travis Hunter, he's been away, and you're replacing them with a quarterback from Liberty or a 5'11" guy out of Georgia. I don't know that that's really probably the key. You also lose almost all of your receivers, although they do have good ones coming back, obviously. Colorado is an interesting one, though, because for Colorado to be relevant, Deion Sanders has to be out there because, nobody really cares about Colorado without Deion. I will say that I like Colorado fans a lot. I don't like Deion fan, but I like Colorado fan a lot because they've always, I thought they've always been pretty cool. But Colorado is an interesting one because you could see them if Deion's not there, or if they're not able to, put together something, this could be a very, very long season in Boulder. And then you start wondering what exactly is that next step then for Deion, for Colorado, because, it doesn't feel like it's really sustaining at that point. So obviously there's that. Now, the other one too that's going to be really interesting about this is ASU. Now, we've heard for basically, my entire life that ASU is a sleeping giant, that, that ASU is going to be a problem for anybody and everybody out there. And, on paper, they should be. You're in Phoenix. Not only are you in Phoenix, you are also in a spot where, like I said, you've got some history there. It's been a while, but you've got some history there. And you should also be able to they put a lot of guys in the NFL. But they've never been able to sustain it. What ASU fan does not realize is that ASU, the last 30 years is essentially, or last 25 years, whatever you want to put it, is essentially Arizona. You're good once every 10 years, and then in between, nobody really cares. And that really shouldn't be the case if you're in Phoenix. Now, they've had some interesting hires. Herm Edwards was obviously a scumbag. Herm Edwards was a detestable human being. And he showed that during his time in Tempe. And despite all the talent, I think there was one roster where you had, I think it was something like 25, 22 future NFL players. They just never were that good. And a big reason why is because Herm Edwards isn't that good. And like I said, that is what it is. But Kenny Dillingham comes in there. He brings in character and he brings in integrity. And I think the thing that with Kenny Dillingham that you look at is he wants to be there. I think, with a place like Arizona, a place like ASU, you have to have a coach that wants to be there. If they want to be there, then I think that, you can win. But I believe it when Dillingham says that that's his dream job. Now, the question is, can you string together 2 really, really good seasons in a row? Because they haven't been able to do that in a long time. Similar to Arizona, obviously, but they haven't, like I said, it's been quite a while since they've been able to do that. Now, listen, you lose Cam Scatterbo. That is a monster loss. There's really no way around it. He might've been the best running back in the country last year from getting all the tough yards, running the football, to receiving, to just doing a lot of different things. Cam Scatterbo was the man. And you generally, like I said, you generally just don't replace people like that. But they got Kyson Brown. They got some other guys who I think they feel pretty good about. We'll see. But you return the overwhelming majority of the team, and it starts up front, obviously. You got Sam Levitt coming back. You got Jordan Tyson. You got the kid coming in from, I can't remember where it is, but I don't know, Fresno State or something. So they should have a really good passing attack. But the biggest question, I think, for ASU is what is going to be the case? Can Sam Levitt do that without Cam Scatterbo? Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Sam Levitt doesn't look the part, because he definitely does look the part. But when you remove just an absolute horse like Cam Scatterbo from the backfield, what does that mean for you? And I think that's something that we don't know yet. We're going to find out. But the O-line, obviously, you return a lot, and on the defensive side, I know you lose like Shamari Simmons, but overall, you got all the D linemen back, linebackers, secondary. On paper, it's a loaded team. We're just going to find out, though, if they're able to basically move that into the realm where you're being consistent. Now, the next one, too, that you got to talk about is, and just kind of the biggest wild card in all of this, is Texas Tech and their money. Texas Tech has a lot of money, and they are spending it. They're, which I applaud. I've never understood schools where you have a lot of money and you don't spend it, or donors that make a lot of money and they don't spend it. That makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. But so they're spending it. Is it going to show up on the field? Now, you look at it in some of the players they've got coming in the next year or two. We're talking top 5, top 10 players in the country, 5-star kids that you generally do not see at Texas Tech. But like I said, we'll see. Is their coach the right guy? Like, I remember watching Tech last year, and I'm like, man, that's not a good team, because Arizona should have beaten them. But Tech with that money is interesting now. Because they've almost got SEC type money. So if you've got that kind of money, can you continue to fortify the lines? Can you continue to fortify, bringing in better and better players? It looks like they're doing just that on the offensive line. Can they continue to do that? I don't know that they can continue to do that, but maybe they can. We'll see. But Tech, and it's kind of the same way it is in basketball as well, in that Tech is very much of a, they're kind of a new money, new blood. And you see that with, like a Grant McCaslin, in that you're able to bring back Obi Toppin for $3 or $4 million, or whatever the case may be. You're able to bring in a Lawan Watts for $2 million. You're able to bring in a lot of different guys. So they got money. Tech is an interesting one. The other one then that's also super fascinating, and this kind of falls into all of that, is BYU. BYU, before their quarterback was booted out of campus, BYU was a team that was going to be really, really good. You watch them, and on both sides of the ball, the lines are both very, very good. You return a lot of players. I like Kalani Sitake as a coach. But like I said, when you lose your quarterback, that's a big loss. And Retzlaff was good. I mean, there was no doubt about it. Retzlaff was good. And you just don't go out there and you don't basically just replace somebody like them, especially too when you don't have an off season to be able to make any moves. So, like I said, I wouldn't be thrilled about that if I was I wouldn't be thrilled about that, obviously, if I was a BYU fan. But it is what it is. But I still expect them to be good. I don't know. Who's your quarterback, though? Is it going to be Trayson Bourget out of Tucson? I don't know. That's going to be the question. And we don't know. But they were really, like I said, you look at what Sitake has done. I think he's got an 8-5, 6-7, and then an 11-3 season. He's done a good job. I believe that he's the right guy for the. But nobody in this conference, nobody in college football generally can just lose their quarterback. I mean, look at ASU. If they had lost Sam Levitt, you think they're feeling just as good about putting Jeff Sims in there? Probably not. And, BYU is going to be that case as well. BYU stood on business, as some of the kids would say, by saying, you know what, we don't really care. You violated our policies. We are getting rid of you. We are giving the boot. And that's, like I said, that's exactly what happened then that's exactly what happened there. So there is that. Now, but BYU, we were talking about it a little bit yesterday. I think when you're looking at the I think when you're looking at it, kind of where you're at, BYU is interesting in all of this because, they got a lot of money. A lot of it's going to basketball, but with football as well, that's obviously something to be excited about as well. All right, now we're going to talk about a team that a lot of people think is going to win the conference. I'm somewhat intrigued by them, but there is a question mark involved as well. But first, FanDuel, my friends, FanDuel. All right, here's the deal with FanDuel. All right, so here's the deal. Summer spots in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game, your friends, and get sunburned at the beach. Woohoo, sounds fun. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and it is a lot of fun. The other thing about FanDuel, too, is your money's good. It's not one of these fly-by-night operations where you're like, whatever. All right, so check it out. And the good thing about it is, new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Like I said, whether you're playing in the same game parlay center or working a bet right it into the ninth inning, you can bet before the game, bet during the game. You can bet futures. You got it. Everybody's using FanDuel, and there is a reason for it. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. Now, Kansas State, I think they're the best team in the conference. I think on both sides of the football, on the offensive and defensive line, I think they're loaded. I like their coach a great deal. I like Avery Johnson. I know that he is not a great passer. Dylan Edwards, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot to like about this team. The biggest thing, though, that I think you're going to find out, though, is what is the deal with Avery Johnson? Can he throw the ball? Can he really make the plays when he needs to? You see the pictures. He's obviously a lot stronger now. And keep in mind, this is a program that basically ran off Will Howard that, won a national championship to have Avery Johnson. Can Avery Johnson be that guy? I don't know. I think that's the fascinating thing about all of this. But I do expect him to win I do expect them to win the Big 12. And if they win the Big 12, then they're obviously going to be in the college football playoffs. They're the team that I think is just best equipped if you look at it from both sides, on both sides of the football, on the offensive and the defensive lines. And, just from a coaching perspective, I think they answer the most questions. I also think, as much as I like Iowa State, I think Kansas State has a little bit better top end talent. I also think too that, like I said, it's just a team, a program that's been there. I like Kansas State. Now, with Matt Campbell, the biggest question for anybody with Matt Campbell is always going to be, how long is he going to be at Iowa State? Because he's an awesome coach. And Iowa State is not an awesome job, but you get Rocco Becht out of Phoenix. Obviously, he's awesome, and you get some other guys as well. And you just kind of see that you're like, man, this is what he's been able to do, what he's been able to sustain at Iowa State has been very, very impressive. The biggest question for them, though, will always just be, when is another team going to come calling? Is another team going to come calling, and will he end up staying there? That's where I think that that's where I think that a lot of people don't really know. And I think that's why, like I said, that's going to be interesting. So those are the two teams that most people are picking. Now, I will say this, as far as another team that's obviously right in that mix as well is Baylor. Now, Baylor, to me, I just don't know about the coaching. Now, Aranda, one really good year, bad year, and then he bounced back a little bit last year. But I've seen a lot of questionable in-game coaching decisions where, well, to be quite frank, left a lot to be desired. Is he the guy? I don't know. He does have a really, really good finish there at Baylor when he took over, so he could easily be that. But we'll find out. You got a really good quarterback at Sawyer Robertson. He's probably about as good as anyone in the conference. You got, like I said, you got talent there. The question, I think, is just going to always be, can they continue to improve that? And, what are you like on both sides of the football? And what kind of coach do you really have in Aranda? Then Utah. Utah, we might be sleeping on Utah a little bit because Utah has obviously been a very, very good program for quite a while. Kyle Whittingham is the man. The question that I think, you have though, last year, that quarterback position was atrocious. And I think that was probably coaching malfeasance. You had a quarterback in, Cam Rising that literally couldn't move, and you refused to take him out of games. He couldn't move. He couldn't throw. He couldn't do anything really. And you kept him in there, and you were basically sacrificing games. You look at that ASU game, they gave that game away. There were some other games as well that they basically gave away. It was fool's gold, obviously, when Arizona went in there and beat them. But I'm going to say this. Devin Dampier, I like him a lot. I think he's a really good dual threat quarterback. I think he's going to be a nice fit there in Utah. So, what will that mean? Can that get them more wins? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows, but Dampier's the goods. Dampier's a stud, and he's going to be a light years different, player prospect for Utah. And it'll be interesting to see what Whittingham does with him because, like I said, I don't want to beat up Cam Rising. Cam Rising was tough. He made a lot of plays, but the problem is at the end, Cam Rising just wasn't good enough. I mean, whether you're hurt, whether you're not, it doesn't really matter. Can you get the job done? And he couldn't get the job done. Devin Dampier can get the job done. You're bringing in Wayshawn Parker as well, a kid out of Washington State that I really like. I could see them being a real dark horse. And it's weird to say that about a team like Utah with that kind of, recent history being a dark horse, but I could definitely see them being a dark horse. Now, a team like another team, a dark horse there is Arizona. Here's where I'm at with Arizona. I'm just going to say it right now. Arizona, the key to this team is obviously going to be the offensive line. If the offensive line is decent, then Arizona is going to be okay. Because I like Noah. I like the skill position guys. Across the board, this team should be pretty good. I think the question marks that a lot of people will have, though, will be the offensive line. Because you generally don't get better by losing players like a Jonas Savanea, a Wendell Moy, a Josh Baker, and replacing them with a DeCambra, Deuce, and a Chuba. But we'll see. Now, at the tackle positions, you got Rhino. Obviously, I like Rhino. You've got, Ty Buchanan, who's just kind of meh. But can this offensive line just be okay? Because if the offensive line could just be okay, then I think Arizona could be okay. Defensively, I don't look for this team. I just look for the defense. To me, is very much like the offensive line that just don't suck. If you don't suck, then you're going to be okay. Because let's be honest, I think with this team, you want to win. Here's my goal. Win five, have 5 wins going into the ASU game. So if you beat ASU, you're in position to possibly get into the a bowl game. Make that, because again, in the Territorial Cup, sure, ASU should beat the snot out of Arizona, but we've also seen weirder things. So who knows? That's where I'm at with Arizona, though. Now, some of these other teams too are interesting. Look at a UCF. Some coaches, I think, are just better made for being on the, or better made just for being on the. On a little bit of a smaller scale. And that might be Scott Frost. At Nebraska did everything for Scott Frost. They paid him a ton of money, whatever he needed, but he just wasn't, they always found ways to lose games. He stuck with quarterbacks that weren't good enough. It is what it is. But UCF, I think that he's going to be a good fit. I think that he can recruit. I think that he runs a style that kids want to play in. He's a good football coach. He's probably a little bit more at his level. That said, I think that they're going to suck this year. I don't think that they're going to be very good, and I don't think that there's much he can do about it. Now, there's a name that Arizona fans know that I expect to be running the conference here shortly. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now, Rich Rodriguez. Rich Rodriguez is back in West Virginia, and I think he is going to kill it. Rich Rodriguez is the man. Like I said, he's got some flaws. He's not a great recruiter, but I think he figured that out, that he's got to be able to recruit, so he puts people around him. But as a coach, he's great. You look at what he did at Jackson State. You look at what he's done at his previous stop at West Virginia. I think he's going to kill it. I think he's going to do a great job at West Virginia, and I think he's going to put guys in position to succeed. It wouldn't surprise me at all if in the next 3 or 4 years, West Virginia has won the Big 12 football championship. Rich Rod is that type of a mind. And like I said, I think he's learned from a few things. The one thing you've got to be able to do is you got to be able to recruit. When you're a great X's and O's coach like he is, you got to be able to get the right players in there. Now, again, there are some times that you can make an exception for somebody like a Samaje Grant, but you can't have 8 Samaje Grants. You can't have guys that are just clearly not good enough or too small, whatever the case may be. You can't have any of that. But I think that he is like I said, I think he's going to do a really good job. And he's the kind of coach too, that he adapts to his surroundings. I mean, if he looks at the players, he looks at what he's got, and he comes and he makes it work. I mean, you think about his first year here at Arizona, he had Matt Scott and Kadeem Carey, and he's like, all right, well, we're going to be running the ball a lot, but I also got good enough guys to be able to throw the ball. And then after that, you had BJ Danker, and he turned BJ Danker into a really good quarterback as well. Rich Rod's just one of those coaches that just kind of gets it. When he gets it, he just kind of, and you just kind of run with it from there. But Rich Rod's the man. If I'm a West Virginia fan, I'm super excited. Because I think you're going to take a little bit of a step back. Well, I don't know if you step back, but I don't think you're going to be great. I know you got a couple good skill position players, but give Rich Rod a couple years, and that's going to be a program that I think is going to be very, very good. Now, I think the next question is, can the Big 12 get 2 teams in? Listen, I think with Brett Yormark, he's going to try his best. I think with the propaganda that goes into so much of this, it's probably going to be a little difficult. But I will say it wouldn't shock me, because I think you're going to have one team that wins it and just wins it going away. But you're going to have another team that maybe has like one loss, and you look at them and you're like, all right, you got to get them in there. The 2 teams that are probably most equipped for that, and I could be wrong, obviously, I think Kansas State's going to win the conference. I think ASU is probably fairly well equipped for that as well, because you look on their lines are pretty good. And that's what you need when you're going against a really good teams. You got to have good line play. And if you got good line play, then a lot of times you could make it work, especially if you got a good quarterback, you got good wide receivers, you got guys that can, do stuff like that. So that's the question. Can the Big 12 get 2 teams in? Probably not, but I think those would be the teams that would be very interesting to watch in this and to see how it plays out. Utah, to me, I'm going to keep coming back to that. Utah, to me, is a massive wild card in all of this, because if Utah is able to win, if Utah is able to keep Devin Dampier healthy, then you could see a team that is going to be problems for about anybody, because we've seen that before. And I would argue this as well, that I think that you can make the case that Devin Dampier is about as dynamic a quarterback as Utah has had in quite some time. So there's a lot of interesting questions. And you got some other teams too that, like your Cincinnati's and your, schools like that, it's kind of like whatever. But there's a lot of intrigue in this conference. And honestly, it's not as good as the Pac when it comes to football, obviously, but there's a lot of fun stuff going on in here as well. And it's not like it's a conference where it's just, where you're playing, it's not like it's Boise State from years past where you're essentially playing nobody. There's a lot to like in this conference. And that's what I'm going to keep coming back to, is that Arizona has a winnable schedule. Now, are you probably going to lose to Iowa State and Kansas State? Yeah, you probably are. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to pick up a win here or there, because Arizona always beats some team that they shouldn't beat. And again, the goal is a bowl. That is what it is. The goal is a bowl. If you get to a bowl, then I think you start looking at year 3, and that's, like I said, that's kind of what this is all for me, is you start looking at it as a springboard to the next to the next code. And that's where I think it's going to go from there. But I'm excited about all of this. I think it's going to be an interesting season for Arizona. A big part of it, though, is having some coaches in play that know what they're doing. Obviously, you didn't have that last year with Dino Babers. So again, we don't ask for much, but I'm going to keep coming back to this. I need to be entertained. That is the biggest thing for me. I need to be entertained, and I need to see a product that isn't absolutely terrible on the field. If that's the case, then I think that we will be in a good spot. Now, tomorrow, we're going to talk a little bit. With football camp starting, we're probably going to break that down a little bit. We're also going to talk a little bit of Arizona basketball, because again, this is the time of the year. Things are starting to heat up, ladies and gentlemen. And I think that is, like I said, it is a good time to be an Arizona fan, especially too when it comes to basketball, when it comes to football, when it comes to all of that. Again, Even when we stink, we're going to have fun with it as well. But as always, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. Bear down, back the A, locked on your team every day, and have a great, great weekend. And we will be back with you